So I have a great pleasure to announce and to introduce Jack McLamb. I wish my mother was still alive, because I was the scallywag out of all the children that she had, and I think she would really be surprised for an old Virginia boy like me to be up in front of a distinguished group like this and be receiving applause. I'm humbled, I really am. I usually tell people, you know, they want so bad to have good leaders in our country today that sometimes we go a little bit too far and we trust too much. That the people we see before us, speaking before us, are good people, are honest people. And I want you to know something. And I think this is a very important point to start with. I always get embarrassed when someone reads some of the things that the Lord has allowed me to accomplish in my life. And I always say when people are reading this, but I'm just a regular guy. I'm just an average fellow. I don't have a great education, which before I stop speaking tonight, you'll know that. For a Virginia boy, English is a foreign language, you know? And it certainly is for me. And so I'm amazed that I'm up here before you when so many of you should be up and I should be in your seat applauding you. So I'm always just blown away by this. And I give a lot of thanks to a lot of wonderful private citizens that shared knowledge with me years ago so that I could be here today doing the things that I think the Lord has made a little space for me to operate within. And I give credit to the Lord and to all of you folks here for reaching out into the community across this great state and across the United States as hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Americans are meeting tonight at the same time in different locations to do the work that this nation needs to be done so bad. Tonight I want to share with you some thoughts on who these people are in uniform today, our soldiers and our police officers. We hear there's a new breed today, and indeed there is a new breed today. And I'm going to spend my time tonight talking to you about that because you probably know already that in the future the people in uniform are going to be spending more and more of their time involved in your lives here in America. So we better know who these people are. I want to start by saying that officers will tell you today that they don't get much respect. And I know if I were to ask some of you for comments, you could tell them why they don't get much respect today. And this comes home to me as just a couple months before I had to take a medical retirement for injury suffered in the line of duty in 1986 in Phoenix. I was patrolling a beat area in a very bad part of town. It was on a Sunday, and I had what's called a jumper. And I had gone to the location the radio had told me about, and there was a gentleman standing on a ledge in a small hotel, 3rd floor up, and there was a fire in the hotel. And this gentleman was one of the people I knew in my beat area. He was an alcoholic and had been an alcoholic for years. And this Sunday morning, he was standing out on the ledge with no clothes on. And the fire was coming out the window and hitting him on his backside. It was that bad a fire. Well, I called some other units in, and the fire trucks were on the way, but they weren't there yet. Now, this was a critical situation because this gentleman was getting burned. And as he stood out on the ledge hollering for help, about 3 other police cars arrived, and we ended up with about 6 officers and 4 blankets. And we decided, because this gentleman was 3 stories up and he was being burned as he hung there, that we would encourage him to jump into the blankets as we held on to them. And so all of us gathered around and grabbed these blankets, and we said, "Jump, Harry, jump." And he looked down at us. We're here to rescue him. And he says, "I'm not going to jump." And the fire keeps hitting him and striking his backside, so we knew he was getting burned. We said, "Harry, jump, jump." And he says, "I don't want to jump." And I asked him, "Why, Harry? Why not?" He says, "Because I don't trust you. If I jump, you're going to pull the blanket away." Talk about distrust. Well, I said, "Harry, you're going to be burned alive if you don't jump." I said, "Now, we're not going to move the blankets. Jump." And Harry persisted that he wouldn't jump. Well, all of a sudden, there was an explosion in the room, and the fire hit him again, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to jump." He says, "Put the blankets on the ground and step away from them." So when I think of distrust for officers today, I remember old Harry on that ledge. It can't get much worse than that, you know. Well, in 1976, I'll take you back just a little bit because I want to tell you about what police work was like then and bring you up to date to what it's like today with the new breed of police officers. But before I take you to 1976, I want to do what I always do at meetings and sometimes forget, so I have to do it at the end of the meeting, but I think I'll do it at the beginning this time. And that is, I want to thank all the police officers, emergency service people, and soldiers that are here today for attending the meeting. I also always want to thank the undercover agents that are in our meetings. We certainly do appreciate you being here. Give them a round of hand. Yeah. I say that because we're so thrilled that, you know, the undercover agents that come in to work our meetings across America are our best converts to the Patriot movement. Because, you see, they're the only ones, you officers here tonight, are stuck. You're the only ones that are a captive audience. You can't get up and leave. You got to hear the whole thing. And inevitably, whenever I do large programs, several undercover agents will usually come up to the booth and badge me where nobody else can see and say, "Jack, I don't want to be on your mailing list, but could I get some of your material?" And we give them the material and they go out the door, you see. And this happens all the time to us today. And I'm holding something in my hand here that really thrilled me a couple months ago. This is a from the United States Treasury Department. We had 2 undercover agents come up to my booth in San Jose after I spoke, and they were DEA agents, a husband and wife team, supposedly. That was their cover. And they came up after the meeting, just like happens at all the meetings, and they badged us and says, "Hey, Jack, we really loved what you say. We believe you 100%. We're behind you. Can we get some of your material so we can read it? But we don't want to be on your mailing list." And so we had just given them the material. They left, and a tall gentleman comes up, about 50 years of age, and he shows me his badge, and he's a Treasury agent. And he says, "Listen, Jack, I was in your meeting, and I'm just very much interested in what you had to say. Do you have anything I can take and read?" And so, of course, you know, we gave him the Operation Vampire Killer 2000 and one of our newsletters. So he came back the next morning. This was a 3-day program in San Jose. And he came up to the booth, and I said, Phil was his name. I said, "Phil, are you attending the show again today?" And he says, "No, I wasn't going to, but I had to come back and see you." And he says, "Jack, I want to tell you how much I appreciate what you officers are doing." He says, "I stayed up all night long last night and read Operation Vampire Killer 2000, and I want to give you a gift." And so he pulls out this little white bag. And I said, now, it's not going to blow up, Phil, if I open it, is it? He says, no, brother. He says, it really is something I want to give to you. So in that white bag was this little white box. And in the little white box was a little blue velvet bag. And so I'm opening this, and I'm saying, Phil, what is this? And he says, just open it. And so I opened it, and it had a silver Lady Liberty silver dollar, uncirculated, with a silver band around it. And I asked him, I said, Phil, what is this? And he says, Jack, and the man just about had tears in his eyes. And I was about the same. He says, Jack, our country's in a lot of trouble. He says, I want to be a part of what you're doing to see if we can help save our country. But I was so moved by that book last night and what some of my fellow officers are doing. He says that I just wanted to show my appreciation. He says this is given to diplomats that come in from foreign countries to the Treasury Department. And I was just very moved by that. But I'm telling you this story because all across America today, praise God, our people in uniform are waking up to the troubles America is in. So I'm here tonight to bring you a good story and some wonderful information about the good things that are happening in America now. Not the bad things, the good things. You need to know that, because I know you hear like we do in Phoenix all the time, all the negative, all the bad, all the things that are falling apart, everything that is going down, down, down. Well, tonight I want to have you hear some of the good things that are happening. And it's to do with people like you and me that are, for the first time, many of us, up on our feet and actually doing something about the problems, instead of just sitting around talking to our friends about how the country is collapsing as we sit there. So these are things that are happening right now that you should know about, because people like me in uniform, be it military or in police uniform, work for you, the people. I know that we're not trained like that today. And we're going to get into that in just a minute, the training that they're receiving today. But some of us today are beginning to realize that we do work for you. We don't work for something called government. We're not there to protect something called government or the system from the people. We're there to protect you, even sometimes from the system. So I will now take you back to that first day for me in the Phoenix Police Academy. It was a very unusual day for me and also the Phoenix Police Academy, because in that classroom that first day in 1976 were all young people except for me. They were 20 and 21 years of age, and I was 32 at that time. And they called me all kinds of names, the granddad, the old man, and all these things because of my age difference. But it was an interesting day for me. The very first day I raised my right hand, I became a Phoenix police officer. The very first day. And I was proud of that oath that I took that day, because once before in my life, in uniform, I took almost that identical oath as a soldier. And I was very proud of that oath. I can't tell you what it meant to me. I grew up in Washington, D.C. At that time, the schools were actually taking you around to let you see the national monuments, the homes of some of our great founders, and telling you the truth about the stories of these leaders at that time when I went through school. So I had a certain amount of patriotism kind of educated into me in the schools in Virginia at that time. Well, so the second time I took this oath was as a Phoenix police officer now. And I was determined once again to serve and protect the people of the United States in the area of Phoenix, Arizona. But within days, folks, within just a few days, I began to hear things in that police academy that disturbed me very much. In 1976, I was 32 years of age. The others were 20 and 21 years of age. When statements like this, "You are the thin blue line. You are no longer a citizen. You are an entity of government, raised to a level above the citizens to better supervise them for their own good." When things were said like that, I was appalled by that. But it was interesting that I would look around at my fellow classmates, and they were beaming. They were excited. They were ecstatic about this new position they had been granted above the other citizens. They had no real knowledge about life at that age. Very few did. Some had been in the war, though, however, but that was me. I was the only one that had been in the war that was sitting in that room at that time. So what I noticed is over the weeks, as the speakers and the educators, the trainers from the police department, from the Regional Police Academy in Phoenix, Arizona, came forward to tell us about how we would actually work as Phoenix police officers and educate us so that we could serve as Phoenix police officers, these things kept coming out. Every few days there would be a statement that would hit me right in the head, and the other young people there would just accept what they were being told. Another one was, "You can't trust the citizens out there. You can't trust them to ever help you if you ever need help. You can only trust a fellow officer." And it went on, and it went on. We were told things that I couldn't understand it, folks. I couldn't understand why we were being told these things that I knew were not true. Now, should I have spoke up at that time? Maybe I should have, but I didn't. Because this was all new to me. I'm the new kid on the block. I don't know what being a police officer is like. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to take it all in. And I did for 16 weeks. We were put in a high-stress situation, and we were pressured so much so that 1/3 of the class quit in the 16 weeks. It was very much like boot camp that I'd gone through in 1976. A lot of pressure, a lot of training, a lot of learning of laws. The same laws, matter of fact, that a lawyer learns in 4 years, we had to learn those laws in 16 weeks. And plus the city codes and the county regulations and things like that. So it was a very high-pressured class and a program. But the thing that troubled me the most then, folks, in 1976 is that as a businessman, after getting out of the service during the Vietnam War, I got out in 1968, I was in business from the time I got out until I became a police officer in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'd been successful at business. And one thing I had learned in business was that the art of communication was learning to walk a mile in the other guy's moccasins, learning to understand and listen and to get inside that person so you could kind of bring each other together and understand each other entirely. And what I saw happening in the Phoenix Police Department, without a doubt, was that it was a program to divide the police officers mentally, psychologically, from the citizens on the street, to set them apart. And I couldn't understand it because I kept thinking to myself, if I have to go out on the streets of Phoenix and I have to go to people in the worst days of their lives, the day when someone's injured or someone's dead or someone's being in some horrible predicament, the last thing I want is to not be able to empathize with them and sympathize with them and me become their brother or their sister at this time of need. And yet I saw the purposeful division of police officers from the people. And in 1976, I had no idea what that was for. I didn't understand it. I let it go. And for the next 3 years, I dedicated myself to becoming a police officer in the city of Phoenix. All I can tell you is the Lord had hold of my life at that time. I was baptized in the Caribbean during the Vietnam War, matter of fact, and so I've been a Christian for quite a long time. But for some reason, I could do no wrong. The first 3 years I was on that department, I won every award the city of Phoenix could give to a police officer, and some more than once. And I couldn't understand it. No one could understand it. How can McLamb, how can he do this? I wasn't that much different than everybody else. Well, I was just in the right place at the right time for all these things. I created a program in the city of Phoenix called the Officer Friendly Program that I used on my beat area. And before long, the Sears Roebuck Foundation had me doing it all over the United States in police departments. I mean, it was amazing what happened to me. And I couldn't understand what it was happening for. Today I know, but I didn't know then. And so within 3 years, I was the boy wonder, kind of an old boy, but I could do nothing wrong, and the chief of police loved me. He wanted to adopt me. He wanted me to be his son. I mean, he had so much national accolades coming in to the Phoenix Police Department, and I just was well loved by everyone on that department. Well, then I ran into one of you folks. And you changed my life forever. I was asked to go out because of my notoriety. I was asked to go out to Sun City, Arizona one night in police uniform. And by the way, I'm looking around here. There's not many suits and ties in here. And this old cop doesn't like this outfit. Do you mind if I take my tie and jacket off? Would you mind? Thank you. Teresa, my secretary, is usually in here to help me, but she's stuck outside at the book table, she tells me. So she usually does this, but anyway, I like to get into my work clothes. When I'm talking about this subject, I like to get into the, you know, there we go. I'm very proud of this uniform. I really love the years that I served the people in Arizona in this uniform, and it makes me proud every time I have the opportunity to wear it. I'm a retired officer now, and my retirement badge that the city gave me says retired on it. But it's interesting that because of the work I do today as a retired officer, last December 12th, I really pushed it to the limit. It being politically incorrect in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, and I was arrested for impersonating a police officer. The worst thing I could have done was be at a gun show in this uniform behind a big banner like this that said, "Police against the New World Order, we will not take your guns away." So Sergeant Ted Music came in along with my other buddies. The chief sent them over to arrest me, and they arrested me that day for wearing this uniform. So anyway, so let's go back now real quick to what happened to me when I ran into one of you folks in about 1979. I was invited out to Sun City, Arizona to speak to a retirement group of people that had heard about my escapades in the Phoenix Police Department. I had developed a number of crime prevention programs that spread throughout the city of Phoenix, block watch program and other things, and so I had been invited out by a senior citizens group. And I got to the meeting that night in uniform, just like this, and I had had an hour, a wonderful hour with these fantastic people. And I remember thinking that night, what a shame that we're one of the few nations that put away our most educated, most knowledgeable people at such a young age into retirement centers like that. I was so impressed this night with these people's knowledge and concern, love for country. So it had gone well for 1 hour. And I came to the point in my crime prevention talk when I was going to ask for questions. Now, I had noticed in the back of the room there was a 85, 90-year-old gentleman sound asleep. Now, I understand that because sometimes I fall asleep when I speak too. But he'd been asleep, and he's really looked fairly tired, you know. He's sitting there, and he's very frail, small man. But the minute I asked if there was any questions, his little bony arm goes up, and he's waving his arm around. And I said, I was surprised. I thought maybe he needed to go to the restroom, was asking to be excused or something, you know. But no, I said, yes, sir, what's your question? And I was about to be educated. I was 35 at that time, and I thought I knew a lot. Matter of fact, I had kind of a big head because I was winning all these awards, and I could do no wrong, and I was just, my career potential was going through the roof. People told me on the department I'd be police chief one day if I kept doing what I was doing. I was really feeling good. I didn't realize it, but this man was there on a mission that night. And when his hand went up and I called on him, he says to me, Sonny? He called me Sonny. I mean, come on, I'm Officer McLamb. I'm bad. I mean, I'm Mr. Cool here, you see. I mean, this man shouldn't be calling me Sonny. I didn't say anything. I really didn't. I said, yes, sir. He said, Sonny, do you know the law? And I said, yes, sir, I think I know the law. No one knows all the law because it keeps changing, but what's your question? And he says, Sonny, do you take an oath? And I said, yes, sir, I take an oath. I took an oath to become a police officer. He says, can you remember what's in that oath? These are strange questions for a meeting like this, you see. And so I fell right along with it, you see. And I said, I think I can tell you pretty much what's in that oath. I said, I swore it before when I was in the Vietnam War era. And it went something like this, that I pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the people's rights, their property, their liberties and so forth. And I didn't get it right, but I knew those were the important parts. I said, that's pretty much like my police oath. Why? What's your question? And he says, and you know the law? I said, yes, sir. I've been talking about the law about an hour. What's your question? And I don't know where he's going, you see. And so then he says to me, Sonny, how can you protect... No, he says, Sonny, he says, what is the Sixth Amendment to the Bill of Rights? And I was silent. I didn't know. And I said, sir, I don't know. He says, what's the Eighth Amendment in the Bill of Rights? And I said, sir, I don't know. He says, what's the 10th Amendment to the Bill of Rights? And I didn't know. And I finally stopped him. I said, sir, ask me something about what I was talking about here tonight. I don't know the answers to those things. And I was getting very embarrassed. I'm an Irishman, you see, and when I get embarrassed, my face gets red and I start sweating, you know. And he's really giving it to me up here, and I'm really uncomfortable. And I said, sir, just stop. I said, I don't know the answers to those questions. Ask me about something I talked about tonight. I knew he'd been sleeping. See, he hadn't heard any of it. So he says, one more question, Sonny. And I said, yes, sir. And he says, how can you protect my rights and protect the Constitution if you don't even know what's in it? Oh, my goodness. He totally humiliated me. And as an old Irishman, I got my dander up. It didn't hit me that the guy made a major statement that was important in my life. It didn't hit me at that time. I just got mad. And I said, next question. And I went on to the next question. How could he do that to me? I'm thinking to myself, I'm Jack McLamb. I'm somebody, you know. I mean, I'd say, Lord, who brought this guy here? And I was really feeling bad. And I said, The next question, we went on. So I left that night, and for 30 days after that, folks, for 30 days, I fretted and fussed and steamed about that little old guy embarrassing me in the front of that group of people. I have a hard head, and I missed the whole point. I missed the whole point that he was trying to tell me that night because I was upset, because I was embarrassed. Woe is me. And so I would pray at night. I would literally pray at night. Lord, I don't want to have vengeance in my heart for this old man. Please take this guy away from me. You know? I got bad feelings for this fella. Lord, please just help me forget it. And for 30 days, the Lord wouldn't let me forget it. And I was losing sleep, and I was getting upset. I'd go to work during the day, and my sergeant would say, Jack, you're always upbeat. You're always positive. Where's your oomph? I said, Sergeant, I'm just tired. I told him this story about this little old guy, and he says, Jack, forget about it. Forget about it. Just get on with your work. And so I tried to. But then one night, about 30 days later, I was really talking to the Lord before I went to sleep. Now, as a police officer, you talk to the Lord a lot, and especially working the side of town I worked in. In the 10 years I was a police officer, I lost 7 of my good friends that died on the streets of Phoenix, Arizona, laying down their life for other citizens. And so I prayed a lot. And so that night I prayed, and I said, Lord, I don't know what's going on here, but I can't believe that I'm going to have to keep thinking about this little old guy. And I said, please, please help me get this out of my mind. And that was my prayer that night. I woke up the next morning about 5 in the morning, early. I'm laying in bed, my eyes come open, and it's like the old donkey and the 2x4. You got to get his attention. Well, that morning, the Lord got my attention because I woke up, my eyes came open, and I finally realized that the man had said something to me that night 30 days before that was very, very important in my police career. I went to work that day and I said, Sergeant, I said, I think I've got the answer. You know, the old man was right. I should have known. I said, why, Sergeant, did you have us swear an oath that something we don't even know what it is? And my sergeant, a real wonderful fella, a black guy with a smile that could melt ice. You know, I mean, he's just a wonderful, great sergeant. And he says to me, Jack, what are you talking about? That's just the way we do it. I said, but Sergeant, we should know what we swore to. And I don't know. I said, I'm going home tonight. I'm going to get a copy of the Constitution, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm going to read it. He says, go ahead. He didn't see anything wrong with that. So I did. I went home that night. And the problem was I went to the local library in South Phoenix, and it took them a half an hour to find me a Constitution. They didn't know where one was. You know, and so I didn't think anything of that either. I thought it was an old book, you know, nobody uses it anymore, you know. But they finally got me a copy. I took it home, folks, and let me tell you what. If you are an adult here today and you have not read word to word the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, as an adult, are you in for a treat and a surprise. You will be shocked as I was shocked as what's in those documents. They're so vital to what's going on in our country today. And I would encourage you leaving here today, do anything you can. I'll bet there's some out on the tables. I know there is because somebody showed me a big box of some of the little pocket constitutions out on the tables. Don't leave here without one of those. Take one for a friend, because after you read it, you're going to want to hand one out to somebody, I guarantee you. But anyway, I went back to work that next morning, and I pulled my sergeant in. I said, Sergeant, do you know what's in here? And I've got the Constitution. He says, of course, McLamb, I know what's in there. I said, this is the Constitution. He says, of course it's the Constitution. And he was offended. I said, you know what's in here? And he says, yes, I know what's in there. I said, Sergeant, are we supposed to live by our oath of office? And he says, well, absolutely, McLamb. Of course we have to live by our oath of office. Boy, and he gave me this little speech about the importance of our oath of office. I knew he didn't know what was in there. I knew it. I went to the lieutenant and I said, "Lieutenant, do you know what this is?" And I'm holding the Constitution. He said, "Well, McLamb, it's the Constitution." I said, "Do you know what's in here?" And he says, "Of course I know what's in here." And he seemed kind of miffed at me. And I said, "Lieutenant, are we supposed to live by our oath of office?" And he gave me this speech. "Of course, McLamb, the oath of office is so important." And he gives me this little speech. And I knew he didn't know what was in it. 2 days later, I ran into the captain of our district, the commander. I did the same thing. He gave me the speech about how important our oath of office was. But see, what they didn't know that I now knew is that every week, as a matter of policy and procedure, I was violating my oath of office. Every officer was violating their oath of office. And we don't even know it. We didn't know it. So I was really shocked, and no one wanted to talk to me about it. I'd start to talk to somebody, they weren't interested. What's this? Yeah, we know what the Constitution is, everything. So I had to go outside my department and search for people in the community that could teach me about the Constitution. I had a hunger at that time to know more and to know why I have to be a police officer, and to be a police officer, I have to violate my oath of office to do my job. And so I did go outside the department, and I met some wonderful people in a city called Mesa, Arizona. There was a little ad in the newspaper, so those little ads pay off, folks. It said, "Constitutional classes being given." Boy, I went. That night I went out there. I got in with about 100 people in a meeting, and they were friendly. They shook my hand, and boy, everybody was just so excited. I said, "Are we going to learn about the Constitution here?" They said, "Boy, you better believe it." I said, "Praise the Lord," and so I sat down. And we learned about the Constitution that night. There was a little fat housewife, that's what she calls herself, named Peggy Christensen, that was up on the stage. Some of you know Peggy, the tiger, the kitchen tiger, I'll tell you. And then there was a little guy, a little printer from Mesa called Charles Riley. And they had an organization called the Arizona Caucus Club. Let me tell you, they taught the Constitution. And they taught the Federalist Papers. And I sat there and I loved it for about 2 hours that night. And then they decided to have everybody stand up and tell what you did for a living. All the new people. Well, you know what happened, right? I'm in the middle, didn't know it, but I'm in the middle of a radical, crazy tax protest meeting. I didn't even know it. I didn't know it, so when they said, "Okay, who's the new guys here?" and some people got up, "Well, I'm this and I'm that, I'm a baker," and they pointed to me, I jumped up, "Yeah, I'm Jack McLamb and I'm a Phoenix police officer." Total quiet. Total quiet. And I looked around, I'm going, "Is my fly open or what?" I kind of looked down, I'm going, "What happened?" I stood up and everybody got quiet. So now that was halfway through the meeting. And by the end of the meeting, I was suspecting something's wrong with me because everybody got cold. Everybody kind of cold. I just didn't feel welcome anymore. So I'm scratching my head and I don't know, I don't know what's wrong with anything at this point. And so I was very happy, though, that when I left, they all walked me out to my car. Charles Riley told me 6 months later, because I kept coming back, and I just kept learning. And he says, I said, "Jack, the reason we walked you out to the car the first night?" I said, "No, Charles, I thought it was real nice." He says, "We didn't want you to copy down our license plates on our car." But here's what I'm getting at, folks. One officer can be very, very important in your life. One person in uniform can play a major difference in your life. And you and I know it. I was fortunate, didn't know it at the time, but I was fortunate to be on a learning experience August, a couple years ago, in the mountains of Idaho, at a cabin with a family named Weaver. I have been fortunate, and I've learned that if you will just do what is right, not what is comfortable, not what is easy, but do what is right, God will use you like you just can't imagine today in America. This is the time of a great recovery in our nation today. Anyway, at that time, when I was educated in the Constitution by some wonderful patriots that the government literally hated and was attacking left and right, trying to crush them out of existence, these wonderful tax patriots, tax protesters, that picked up the gauntlet and told the government they were wrong. And indeed, the government is wrong in the area of taxation today. With that training, I went forth to destroy my police career. The first time I went out on the streets of Phoenix and the IRS came to my beat area, they were going to have a new experience in their life. There was 2 agents, and these 2 agents came up to me. I knew them. I'd taken homes before. I'd taken businesses before. Remember, federal agents have no jurisdiction in the cities or the counties. They always have to come to get the local gendarmes, the sheriff, or the police chief, and some of us in uniform to go in to do their work. So this day it was no different. They came in expecting me to go seize a guy's business. So they came over and I met them at a certain location. I said, okay, you guys, let's go get that business. But first of all, show me your paperwork. Wow. You ought to have seen the look I got. Their eyes got big. They looked at each other, looked back at me, looked at each other, looked back at me, and said, what paperwork? I said, you know what paperwork? You have to have paperwork for me to go in and seize this business. I know the guy in there. I got to show him some paperwork if we're going in. He says, no, you don't have to show him anything. You just go get him out here and we'll move his wife and him out on the steps and we'll shut the door and chain it and we'll put our sign up. I said, no. I said, I've got to see the paperwork. I said, I'm responsible here. You guys don't have jurisdiction. I want to know what we're doing. So they really got into a tizzy with me. They argued with me, and they weren't going to show it to me. And I finally said, okay, I'm leaving. And they, okay. And they fished around in their pockets and pulled out some wrinkled up old piece of paper. Turned out to be a seizure notice. But I noticed that their names were at the bottom. They signed it. How many of you know what the Constitution says about that, the Fourth Amendment? Who signs it? A magistrate, based on probable cause and those kind of things. That's the way things are supposed to be done. Well, I looked at it with my new training and I said, hey, isn't this your name? Isn't this your name? Yeah, that's our name. I said, well, this is no good. And he said, what do you mean it's no good? They said, we've been doing this for 10 years, and it's always been good. I said, well, it's no good in my beat area anymore. So they left in a huff. And it was a half an hour later, I was in the chief's office. Let me tell you, you'd have thought a bomb had gone off in the city of Phoenix. Unheard of. Never before. They were the kind of things I was told. Who do you think you are, Officer McLamb? What are you challenging these guys for? They're federal agents. I said, no, boss. I said, listen, this, and I pulled out my little pocket Constitution. I said, do you know what this is? I said, they're not the boss. this is the boss. And he says, I asked him if he knew what it was, the chief. He says, of course I know what it is, McLamb. I said, Chief, do you know what's in it? He says, of course I know what's in it. I said, well, let me take you to this section right here. Read it, read it, read it. And I had him read it. And he couldn't believe it. He didn't know what to say to me because I was absolutely right. But let me tell you, that was the beginning of the end of my career. Because they can't have that, folks. They've got a system going here. They've got a plan going here. And the Constitution, if we learn what it is again and start questioning authority, just like that button says right there, question authority, they cannot survive. Their plan cannot survive because these documents are still good, and they're still wonderful, and they're still powerful as long as the people will use those documents. And so my career, for the most part, ended during those next couple years. I became the most highly decorated officer before I learned about who I took my oath of office to. I became the most highly rewarded officer before I learned that I didn't serve and protect a system. I served and protected the people. And after I learned that, I became the most fired officer in the history of Phoenix, Arizona. Those were some rough times, because I wasn't used to being chastised, being treated like a criminal when I wore this uniform by my own department. I wasn't used to having a sergeant assigned to me for 9 months to follow me night and day when I was on duty, when I was off duty, to try to find some reason to fire me. I wasn't used to that. I just wanted to do my job and protect the people that I had taken an oath to protect. Those were rough days, and it caused me one night when I was terribly depressed to sit down and write 3 pages on paper. Those 3 pages was me pouring out my heart to any other officer anywhere that would tell me I'm not wrong. Everybody was telling me I'm wrong. Jack, you can't be a police officer. You can't operate like this and be a police officer. And I kept saying, why not? It's the law. I wrote 3 pages in a state of depression. I mailed it out around the country to about 100 publications. None of them understood the ravings of a lunatic police officer in Phoenix, Arizona about his oath of office and all this. None of them would print it. All I wanted to do was reach another officer anywhere that would say, Jack, I feel the same way you do, but I've had nobody to talk to about it. Praise the Lord. 3 months later, a little publication in Arkansas called the Justice Times published those 3 pages. A.J. and Anita Lowry, some of you recognize that name, those names. Wonderful patriotic Americans. They called their little publication the largest tax protest publication in the nation. And they understood what I was saying, and they published those 3 pages. It was called A Lawman Speaks for Liberty. And my mailbox filled up with mail. That's what I needed. I needed it very, very badly. And some of the letters were from police officers, and some were from soldiers that took that same oath and understood what I was talking about. That's all I needed to go forward. That's all I needed to be lifted up so I could continue to do what I was doing and believe that I was right. Well, I did. I did just that. I continued to learn about the oath I took and the people I served. about the founding fathers and the great documents that they had given us. And I went through 5 years of hell on earth, I'm telling you. 5 years, unbelievable. The stress was unbelievable because I worked in the worst area of town. I worked in the high crime area that nobody else wanted to work in. It was dangerous, and I prayed daily that I'd just live. And many officers, good friends of mine, broke under the stress of just the streets. One dear brother went home one night and shot himself and his son to death after duty. Another one went and shot a roommate and stole a Corvette. They just break under this pressure. This is the war zone out there. Not only did I have that pressure, but my whole department was out to get rid of me and find me doing something wrong. They followed me, and they wrote, anytime I would approach a car and I wouldn't approach it just right, they would write me demerits and things like that. And so for 5 years, God granted me the ability to stand up to this pressure. Not without a loss, because if you notice, I shake now a lot, and that was one of the little things that I was left with because of that pressure. But God allowed me to be able to pass on the knowledge I was gaining from you folks, that you gave me, that you shared with this hard-headed police officer, so I could then take that information and share it with other officers across this nation, and soldiers too, in a publication called Aid and Abet Police Newsletter, Constitutional Issues for Lawmen. And today, folks, because of your help, not because of me doing any great things, you know, but you getting this in the hands of your police officers and your soldiers, we're now reaching hundreds of thousands of people in uniform with that publication. We have a mailing list of thousands now. And the people in those uniforms are seeing what's happening to America and the destruction that's coming upon our great nation, and they love this country. I don't know how I've been so fortunate to be able to serve with the 3 greatest patriot groups in this nation. One is our fine people in uniform in the military. I was so blessed to serve with these great people, great Americans that love this country. And then I was blessed to serve with police officers in uniform and be there when I saw their essence of life, their blood drain onto the streets of Phoenix as they gave their life for their fellow man. 7 of them. And now I serve in the private sector with you folks who are the greatest patriots America has to offer in the private sector. How can... Thank you. He does. I start talking about those things and I get very emotional. Please forgive me, folks, that it's been quite a history that I've gone through, and when I think about it, it really kind of gets to me. But I want to take just a minute to show you something here for those that haven't seen this. Just a few years ago, 2 years ago, perhaps 3, the Council of Europe put out a poster. Some of you have seen this poster. And this poster says it all as to the struggle we're in America today. Some of us believe that we are in a political struggle in America. Some people that know that's not true. People that really have done their studying know that we're in a spiritual struggle, not just in America, but across the world. This poster I saw, and I immediately knew what it meant. And as a Christian, any Christian would know what this poster means. And what we found in this poster was that the conspirators, the globalists that have set this plan in motion to put us into a global society, a world government, a one world government, Actually, the people at the very top are not the atheists and the communists we thought they were. The people at the very top are highly religious people. They're highly spiritual people. It's just that they worship a different God than what we do. And this is their poster. This poster will show you that old biblical story of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was destroyed by God when the people decided to form the first one world government, bring all the people of the world together, and they built this tower, and God destroyed it and changed their tongues, changed their languages. And what we find today, the Council of Europe have put out this poster to show, of course we weren't supposed to know what it meant, but this poster shows us that they are rebuilding the Tower of Babel against God's word, against God's direction, and they're using robot people. You can't all see it out there, but there's robots down here, people that are robotic people. That's you and me. And we're building this Tower of Babel back up, a one world government, to the new God. And you see who that God is? That's Lucifer. That's the behemoth, the goat of Mendez, the goat head, which is the sign of Lucifer. You can see the ears or the horns on the goat and the little goatees here on the goat and the ears. So what we have here is their little, it's a little prod to one another that their goal is working. So before we go any further tonight, you have to know that these people, some of you in the audience, there may be people here in the audience that are not religious. But I wanted to bring this out because I want you to know these people are. They are very religious, and they are obeying their God. And they are following the direction of their God. And so it makes no matter what you believe here tonight. It matters what they believe here tonight, because this is their plan that they're operating not just in the United States, but other parts of the world. Now, we have new people here tonight, I'm sure, and you're probably thinking, what the heck is this that George Bush started talking about called the New World Order? So very quickly, I'm going to tell you. Now, Clinton is, of course, working towards the same goals. As we know, many of us, that it makes no difference today if you, at the upper levels in our government, if you vote Republican or Democrat. It really doesn't matter. The only difference is the Republicans. I was a Republican precinct committeeman for many, many years, and it didn't matter. At those higher levels in the federal government, those federal offices, the presidency, it makes no difference, because the only difference is the Republicans will take you slower into the global society, and the Democrats are just running full bore into it. So the only difference between the two parties is speed in which we're going into a collectivist society. Okay, so just real quick, what is the New World Order? Let me share you a thought here. This is coming from one of our senators out in Phoenix, Arizona, Goldwater, Barry Goldwater. He said in a book he wrote in 1967, he wrote in a book about the Trilateral Commission and the CFR. He says their goals were to bring the centralization of the four centers of power in the United States together. And he says those four centers of power that were being brought together and controlled were, number one, the political center of power, the monetary, economical, and the educational. But the thing that shocked me the most when I read his book is he said the ecclesiastical. That's the religion. And we read in Scripture, of course, that one day there would be a world religion to go with that world government. And here's Barry Goldwater saying that the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations in 1967 No, it was 1976, because the Trilateral Commission, I think, was formed in 1972. That's right. But he said anyway that they were bringing together a world government by bringing together the four centers of power. Now, the ecclesiastical, what do we see happening here? Well, all around us today, I'm hearing from police officers and soldiers and people in the private sector saying that they're noticing that their mainline denominational churches are beginning to soften on some of their issues, are beginning to capitulate, are beginning to compromise on some of their harder issues that are scriptural, so that they can go along and get along with the other religions. Mine has done that. The faith that I came from, I'm hearing it from almost every one of the mainline denominations. What is going on, folks? Well, the National Council of Churches and the World Council of Churches could tell you. It's called the ecumenical movement. And that means we're all going to just be one big happy family, come together. We're going to soften our feelings and our belief systems a little bit so we can all get together into one wonderful world religion. We were talking today, coming over in the car to Dominic, and we were talking about what's going on in America, and we both agreed that we hear all the time the nation's out of is out of control. Everything's out of control. The educational system, the political system, everything's out of control, and we both agreed, no, it's perfectly in control. It's perfect. It's working exactly the way they want it to work. Anyway, to finish for the new folks here, the New World Order, what we see happening right now, and you can watch it in the media, that you have a tri-regional system being set up in the world. Is it not? The first one is the European Common Market, which we've heard about now for 10 years. It's almost completed. There's a couple countries still arguing back and forth, but the first part of the tri-regional world government is the European Council, the Economic Council of Europe. The second part is to be the Americas, North America, South America, Mexico, and we're supposed to come under an economical system also, and it's called NAFTA. And it just passed not too long ago. That means that the second part of the tri-regional system to put together this world government is almost completed. They're still working out the details on NAFTA right now. And then the last part will be the Pacific Rim nations. They are, I remember hearing, 6 months ago that President Clinton flew to meet with the Asian nations over an economic system for the Asian nations. So that's underway. So for the new people here, the New World Order, the world government will be a tri-regional system. Once all three of these systems are set up, they'll be brought together under one system called the Utopian New World Order to people like the Clintons and the Bushes and the Perots. I'm sorry to tell you folks. George Bush said it like this. If you get a copy of the Operation Vampire Killer 2000 out there, this is a police manual that's been written for police officers and soldiers. It's called America Police Action Plan for Stopping the Program for World Government Rule. And on page 21, George Bush tells all of us in uniform something very surprising for all of you in uniform tonight. It says here, "It is to the sacred principles enshrined in the UN Charter to which we will henceforth pledge our allegiance." I don't know about you, but I got a surprise for George. UN building. The UN building, February 1st, 1992 is when he made that statement. This little book, by the way, has all kinds of little goodies in it about the New World Order. It was put out by 3 police organizations for hard-headed police officers and soldiers that don't want to believe what's really happening in America. We've got a lot of information in here. we need to go back now and tell you how did this group of people decide on how they could destroy America to the point, lower it to a point where it could be merged with the rest of the nations of the world. Well, in 1954, I was in Washington, D.C. I was a child at that time, and Eisenhower was in the White House. Some of you are too young to know about Ike, and I was a young guy. I saw the inauguration when he was brought into office. But in 1954, a gentleman by the name of, what was his name? Let's see, it was a Reese Commission. No, keep coming. Let's see. Rowan Gaither was head of the Ford Foundation at that time. Norman Dodd, thank you very much. Okay. Norman Dodd was doing some work on the Reese Commission, a federal congressional commission to study tax-free foundations in 1954. And the government at that time wanted to know what the tax-free foundations were using their money for, seeing that they were tax-free. They were given these benefits. So Norman Dodd had been going around to the heads of all the foundations, the Mellon Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, on and on and on, and he'd been getting the cold shoulder. They didn't want to tell him. And what he did get, he didn't believe, because it didn't look like they were giving him the right information. So he was pretty depressed. Norman Dodd, the next day, went to the Ford Foundation, 1954, remember that date. And he met with the head of the Ford Foundation, Rowan Gaither. And he asked him the same question, kind of depressed, thinking he's going to get more malarkey. He says, what are you using your tax-free funds for, and what are your goals here at the Ford Foundation? And Rowan Gaither, if you don't remember anything else tonight, remember this statement. It's in The Vampire Killer out there. Get it. And it's in here. But it's so crucial to what's going on in our country. Because Rowan Gaither answered with the truth. And I imagine Norman Dodd almost fell out of his chair when Rowan Gaither said to him, we operate here out of directives that emulate from the White House to use our grant-making powers to alter life in the United States so we can be merged with the Soviet Union. Now, that's just one paragraph if you write it down. But it impacts everything that's been happening in our country for the last 50 years, folks. Everything. Everything is being done to lower the standard of living, to lower the economic system, the political system, the educational system, the morals, to where we could be leveled and merged with the other nations of the world. And so if you want to know what the New World Order is, that's what's going on. And Rowan Gaither, God bless him, I think the Lord just hit him over the head that day and he just blurted this out. He probably was very upset he said it after that, but somebody zapped him and he told the truth. And Norman Dodd took it back, and it's recorded in the congressional record what the head of the Ford Foundation told him. So if you want to know if everything's out of control in America, no. It's not out of control. It's perfectly under control. Your children are not being educated anymore except into socialism. Here's, by the way, in The Vampire Killer, there's an education system, and I got to share this with you. It says here, there are professors that teach prospective teachers. You know that. Now these professors, the young prospective teachers come in and they believe what they're told by these educators. And in here we've got a couple quotes of some of these educators that teach the prospective teachers that are going to teach our children. And listen to this. Dr. Chester Pierce of Harvard University tells his prospective teachers this: every child in America who enters school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with an allegiance to our institutions towards the preservation of this form of government that we now have. Patriotism, nationalism, and sovereignty. All that proves that these children are sick because a truly well individual is one who has rejected all of these things and is truly an international child of the future. So we have a whole section on education in here that has some great quotes that you can use to show people what's really going on in the educational system. But let me take you back now to the Constitutional Convention very quickly. The Constitutional Convention is where the plan was being fomented to destroy the United States so that it couldn't get to be a large and powerful nation. The people that were going to work this plan for a global government were actually in the Constitutional Convention. And they heard things there that gave them the actual method to use to destroy America. And I'll share a few of these with you. You'll notice my Vampire Killer has tabs all through it because it has so much information I can't remember where everything is. But this is on quotes from the Founding Fathers. These are people, some of them were in the Constitutional Convention. But if you were one of those conspirators sitting in that Constitutional Convention at that time, looking for a way to destroy America, see if you can glean from these statements how you would destroy this nation. Listen to this. Now, I've got some of them in here that weren't in the convention, but basically it's the same information here. Andrew Jackson, for one, said, "The Bible is the rock on which our republic rests." George Washington, "The people knew that it is impossible to rightly govern without God and the Bible." John Adams, "Our Constitution was made only for a religious and moral people and is wholly inadequate for the government of any other." Benjamin Franklin, "Man will ultimately be governed by God or tyrants." James Madison, "We have staked the whole future of American civilization not upon the power of government, far from it. We have staked the future upon the capacity for each and all of us to govern ourselves, to sustain ourselves according to the 10 Commandments of God."
Do away with the Bible, do away with God.
That's it. See, now he's a quick study. He got that. See, he got that because it's easy. Our founding fathers gave us the way to destroy it. It's all laid out here. Listen, Daniel Webster says, "If we abide by the principles taught in the Bible, our country will go on prospering." And then we had a Frenchman come here from France, a professor who studied our system of government because it was growing so rapidly, it was becoming so successful so fast, and so powerful, and so strong, and so wealthy. The French people sent him over here. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville, to study our system. 2 years he was here. And he wrote a wonderful work, a wonderful book that he took back to the French people. But I think to encapsulate his whole 2 years of study, he brought it together in just one sentence when he went back to the French people. And he said, "America is great because America is good. If America ever ceases to be good, it will cease to be great." That's right. Now, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here tonight, because I know what's happening in this audience, because I was in these audiences many times years ago when I was first learning these things, and I kept saying to myself, we would know about this if this was going on. The media would tell us about it, wouldn't it? Yeah, the media would tell us. There's no way with a free press in America how this could be going on, Officer McLamb, and us not know about it. So give me a break. Tell us the truth. How could this possibly be going on? So we're going to cover the media real quick here. And we always, of course, we got the choir here tonight, I know. But we got to remember there's new people here tonight that are asking that same question you and I asked years ago when we started finding out about this. So let's give them the truth here. Let's give them the truth. I like to start off with Mr. Swinton. Some of you know Mr. Swinton. Mr. Swinton was called the dean of his profession. He was worked for in New York City on several newspapers, the New York Times for one, and Mr. Swinton was called the dean of his profession. He was well loved, had worked for years and decades of writing a newspaper, and then he became he got into management. But on his retirement day at the New York Press Club, Mr. Swinton was asked to give a toast to his fellow newspaper men that had come to celebrate his retirement. And Mr. Swinton, I think, also was struck by God that day, because he said something that probably just absolutely, well, probably from then on upset those people that had known him all these years, because he told the truth. And here's what he said. John Swinton, one of the best-loved newspaper men in the United States, made this statement when he was asked to give a toast. He says, "There is no such thing at this date in the world's history in America as an independent press." He says, "The business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is this of toasting an independent press in America? We are the vassals and tools of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull our strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men." And he ended by saying, "We are intellectual prostitutes." Another man that did a great service for our country, although he didn't intend to, was a guy by the name of Norman Thomas, who was a U.S. presidential candidate for the Socialist Party for years in the United States. And he made a statement about America and how the people of America would be misled. He and Gus Hall, by the way, who was the communist presidential candidate for years in America, withdrew and would never run for president of the United States again on the Socialist Party platform or the Communist Party platform, because they both said that they were withdrawing from politics in the United States because the Republican and the Democratic Party had stolen every platform from the Communist and Socialist platform, and they no longer had anything to run on. But Norman Thomas did us a great favor when he made this statement. He said, "The American people will never knowingly adopt socialism, but under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will become a socialist nation without knowing how it happened." Now, it's this in the media that have made statements about this. Herman Dinsmore, editor of the foreign edition of the New York Times, said the New York Times is deliberately pitched to the liberal point of view. ABC reporter Rebecca Chase said, "The prevailing journalistic culture is liberal, and you win awards for validating liberal theories." Barbara Walter, she said, "The news media is generally liberal." Walter Cronkite said, "News reporters are certainly liberal and left of center." But here's the big revealing statements for those of you that believe what you read in the newspaper and in the media every day on the television and out of Hollywood. Richard Salant, former president of CBS News, said, "Our job is to give the people not what they want, but what we think they ought to have." Head of CBS senior producer for political news, Richard Cohen, said, "We are going to try to impose our agenda on the coverage by dealing with issues and subjects that we choose to deal with." What subjects do they choose to deal with? Socialism. Socialism. Remember what Norman Thomas said? This is what you're getting in the media today, folks, for the new people here. And we could go on and on. I've got a whole file on these things. I think the last one on the media, and I'm spending some time on this because it's so important for you to know, you're not getting the truth. You're getting exactly what they want you to get. And, right. This is... The last one I'll share with you is from a character that we've heard about for years, and that is David Rockefeller. Okay. Well, in 1991, he was at a meeting of the Bilderbergers. And he was in Germany, and that was a secret meeting of the Bilderbergers, and we were not supposed to hear what I'm about to read you now. By the way, this can also be found in the Vampire Killer 2000, what I'm going to read you here. But he said to the media that was there at these secret meetings, this is what he said. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. What's discretion mean? Keep it from the public. He goes on to say, it would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those 40 years. He says, but the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. And he says the supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite, like President Clinton and her first husband, the international elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the public to the national auto-determination practice in past centuries. In other words, they truly believe we're going to love what they got planned for us, folks. And there's your media for you. So I didn't want to not cover that because we have so many new folks here tonight, I'm sure, that don't understand why we're talking about these things if they've not heard about it. And that's the reason you're not supposed to hear about it. This is a tough subject for me to talk about tonight. Two areas I'm going to share with you right now. I have police officer friends, military friends that have perished in the last few years, taking, with the police officers, an ounce of marijuana off somebody in a street somewhere in America. I have a good friend in Phoenix, Arizona, fine police officer, only been on 3 years. Good friend of mine that one night stopped a vehicle with 4 youth in the vehicle. He discovered on one of the youths a bag of marijuana. He pulled it out of the youth's pocket. All 4 of them jumped him. One of them pulled a gun and put it to his head and shot him right in the head. He lived, but he's very, very disabled today. His wife and children are in pretty tough shape because of his injuries. He can't do as much as he used to earn a living for them. And so across America, officers are risking their lives and losing their lives and becoming disabled, and military people too, fighting what is a phony war on drugs in America. They don't know it, however. They think that somehow, just like when we went to Vietnam, that somehow we were doing something important for America to safeguard the American people. The police officers that are risking their lives today in a phony war on drugs, and I'll prove it to you in just a minute for you officers in the audience today, are doing that because they love the people. And they think somehow that they've got to risk their lives to try to stop the moral decay and the total destruction of the next generation of Americans. If they can just take that little bit of dope off that individual or a little bit more off this individual, that somehow they're going to have an impact on the narcotics, bombing out a whole generation of young Americans. So they do risk their lives and they do lose their lives every day in America. But what we have here and we know today is I have a folder in my briefcase here that's about an inch thick. I have a file cabinet at home that is filled with evidence, proof positive, witness statements from the left politically, all the way to the right politically, and all the way in between, documentation to prove that the United States government have been importing drugs in from Southeast Asia and from South America since the late 60s in this nation. And they're the biggest importers of drugs in this nation. And we have the proof to prove it. I have another file in my briefcase back here. And by the way, remember, this is from the evidence from the left to the right of the political spectrum and all in between. This is documentation from both sides, all the way to Marxist organizations in the United States that have proven and shown us their documentation that this is true. We got the names of people that in the government have been bringing the drugs in. Colonel Bo Greitz, you know, a few years back brought a wonderful film from, I mean, it's not wonderful, but a very important film is when I first met him in Phoenix, Arizona, when he brought his film back from Southeast Asia, showing an interview he had with General Kumsaw in Shawnland in the Golden Triangle, where General Kumsaw opened his ledgers and showed the names of Richard Armitage, Theodore Shackley, and others that have been importing drugs for the United States government by the tons since the late 60s in the United States. This is hard, cold proof. But why can't we get it out to the American people? We're back to the media again. But not just the media, folks. I've got another file in my briefcase that officers have compiled for the last 10 years, myself included, as to how in America today politically appointed judges have methods for controlling the outcome of jury trials the way they want them to come out. Politically appointed judges are given specific cases against certain good Americans and against certain international bandits to be sure the truth does not come out in a court of law about who is actually behind the drug trade in America. I've got that file, and we did a newsletter on it, a police newsletter showing 8 methods in which a judge, a federal judge, and even district judges, federally appointed judges and locally appointed judges, have been chosen politically because they will cover for the right people to protect this whole corrupt system that has been set up. So you can't get it before a court of law today. You cannot get the facts that we have by the reams and reams of in file cabinets of evidence, testimony of people that have been involved in the drug trade, soldiers that have been involved in the drug trade, not knowing for years, helping the government bring this stuff in here. And the reason I'm telling you this, folks, is for this reason here. Why would our government do that? Remember, the most important statement I told you here tonight was Rowan Gaither's statement, the head of the Ford Foundation, 1954, to lower America to a level where it could be merged with the other nations of the world. Morally lowered, politically, economically, every way you can think, we had to be brought down to a level to where we could be merged with the other nations of the world. The drugs are a very, very important, I would say the most important program the globalists have going is the illicit drugs they're bringing into the United States. Why? Because it's causing a breakdown of society like we've never seen in the history of this nation. The drugs are doing that. And they like it. They are literally ruining the lives and killing off a whole generation of minority children in the part of town I live in. And I pray every night with tears in my eyes that somehow we could get this information here that we're given tonight into the minority areas, into the homes of minority families, so that they can join us, in attacking a common enemy that's destroying the whole generation of their children. we can't do it, folks. We can't do it because we're being stopped at every attempt that we try. And here's why. The most sensitive thing I'm going to tell you tonight, and the thing that'll tear at your guts, and I'm sorry for this, but you have to know this, folks. The thing that's going to tear at your heart is the pure evil that is in the highest offices in our nation today and have been for generations. Pure evil. And I'm going to read you about that evil. I'm going to read you a statement here that we found in the congressional record. It's old, but it just shows how long this diabolical plan has been going on to destroy this nation and pit one group of people against another pit of people to do that, another group of people. It has been a plan for years to keep the races separate in America, separate to where we can't join together to fight the common enemy that's destroying all of us. It's been a plan, and here we found it in the congressional record. Let me get this right. It's a book that was written by a communist, one of the top people in the Communist Party, and it's called A Racial Program for the 20th Century. This man was the man's name is Israel Cohen, and his book was written in 1912. Now, it was read into the congressional record, and if anybody's writing this down, write this down, because you're going to have to prove this to people, because they're not going to believe you. But this is why we cannot save the families of the minorities that are purposely being used to cause crime and drug problems in society so that they can cause a breakdown through fear of all Americans. And it's a plan, and here's the plan. Israel Cohen writes this in 1912, and it was read into the congressional record. I just wanted to give you a minute to get your pen. Write this down. The U.S. Congressional Record of June 7, 1957, page 7653. Let me give it to you again. This is very important. Somehow we have to reach the other good Americans out there that are struggling like you and I are to raise our families without drugs and to raise our family without being involved in gangs and raise our families and raise our children in a moral environment. We must get this out to them, all of this information we're giving out here tonight. It was the U.S. Congressional Record, June 7, 1957, page 7653. And here's what was said in the book written by communists to destroy this nation we all love. We must realize that our party's most powerful weapon is racial tension. By propounding into the consciousness of the dark races that for centuries they have been oppressed by the whites, we can mold them to the program of the Communist Party. In America, we will aim for subtle victory. While inflaming the Negro minority against the whites, we will endeavor to install in the whites a guilt complex for the exploitation of the Negroes. Now, I'm going to stop there because I don't want to read you the rest of it. It is so sick and it's so hideous what is written in that section, and I want you to look it up yourself so you can prove what I'm telling you is the truth. And you'll understand the sickness, the absolute evil that controls not just America today, but the world. These people hate anybody that's not an elitist. They hate anybody that's not rich. And I'm not talking about the little general in Texas. He's not rich. $4 billion is not rich to these guys. Really. Perot is not rich. He's one of the pawns. We're talking about multi billions of dollars is what these people respect, and the only ones. They don't like the white race. They don't like the black race. They don't like the Hispanic race, the Oriental race, if you're not one of the super rich in this world. And so we're all in this together. And there's two Achilles heel of the enemy that I see here that we can attack and attack and attack and hurt them terribly with. And those two Achilles heels is one of them right here. We can work together because we are all Americans with our black neighbors, our Hispanic neighbors, our Oriental neighbors to gain They know they can't win if we all get together and love one another and work towards a common goal of saving our nation. Now, let me say this to you. I'm a Christian. I grew up in Virginia. I grew up with prejudiced people. My family was prejudiced. We learned it. We were taught it. That's the plan. But I read the Bible when I got a little older. And I don't care how you feel. I think God's the final authority, and when He made every one of us, He said it was good. I would read you the rest of this, but I can't take it, folks. I'll tell you, it just tears me up to read it. But if you can't get and look up the congressional record, you folks can write to Aid and Abet Police Newsletter in Phoenix, and you can get our address off one of our publications out here, and we'll send you a copy of this. Now, that's a lot of mail, so if you can drop a couple bucks in there to help with us sending out the mail, it would help, but we'll send you a copy of this thing. And I want you to do this. I want you to remember that the two Achilles heels that we need to attack is we need to get all Americans knowledgeable about who the enemy of our nation is. All Americans. As long as they love this nation and they're willing to work with us to recover what we're losing against the enemy of this nation, we need to share this with them as fast as we can. And the second thing is, folks, that I told Bo a long time ago that it came to me 13 years ago that no tyranny ever came to the door of an American person that it didn't come in uniform. And he agreed with me. He says, Jack, that's right. So one of the greatest Achilles heels that we have that we can take from the enemy is their people in uniform and bring them back to the side of the American people. It is so fantastic if you could open the mail with me every day. And the girls in the office tell me, Jack, let us open the mail. You got more important things to do. I said, no, I want to help because I love the letters. It's wonderful when police officers, sheriffs, police chiefs write and says, what can we do to help? We see the country crumbling. When we see majors and colonels in the service writing saying, let us have some of that literature so we can help hand it out. On our posts, our military posts. It is so wonderful, folks, what's going on right now in America. And I call this part of the program your report card. And I'm gonna share with you your report card, because these letters coming into us from police officers and soldiers that are beginning to understand that they are serving something that is destroying this nation, and they're protecting something that is the enemy of this nation, are beginning to realize that they have to learn how to serve the people once again. And they're writing to me, and I brought some of the letters here tonight. I've got to do this for you, because if you want to feel an uplift, if you want to feel good at what's happening in America today, let me tell you, you think of one thing that President Clinton can do to you that it doesn't come in uniform. There's very little. You know, if he wouldn't go to war and fight for his country, he's not coming after your gun. That's for sure. So, these are a lot of the new ones here. I got a whole folder for. I just love them. I remember the days when I used to sit depressed in the Phoenix Police Department as I was being persecuted, and there was no officers that knew what was going on. And today we have thousands and thousands of them, and soldiers, because of you reaching out with some literature or educating these people, they're writing to us now. And they're using our publications to reach other police officers and soldiers very rapidly. And you've got to hear your report cards. So let me share a couple of these with you. I'll go very rapidly. Here's a Undersheriff, Chief Deputy Sheriff of Los Alamos County, New Mexico, Chris Piercy. He says, "Sirs, I read Operation Vampire Killer 2000. It was excellent. I am the Undersheriff of Los Alamos County Sheriff's Office and also a New Mexico State Police Reserve officer. This publication scared the hell out of me. I want to order," and he ordered a whole bunch of copies of it. Praise the Lord. Isn't that wonderful? I'm just pulling these out as they come now. I'm a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. I heard of your organization through a fellow soldier. As a soldier, I took an oath of loyalty to this country and my obligation to protect this country very seriously. I fear the prospects of a world government that would harm this nation and its people. The New World Order stinks of communism to me. Any information that you will send me about this situation, I would appreciate it. I will make sure my fellow soldiers are made aware of it. This is Specialist Patrick Gabalon, U.S. Army, Special 82nd Airborne. Here's my good friend, who's become a very good friend of mine now, Philip Arnsworth, U.S. Department of Treasury Special Agent, that gave me the medallion. Here's a Detective Sergeant, Macon County, Georgia Police Department. He says here, "Just finished reading Operation Vampire Killer 2000. I was very enlightened. I'm requesting ordering information on Aid and Abet Police newsletter. Thanks so much. God bless. James Mayer." Here's another one. Special Forces Sergeant, National Guard Special Forces. I'm a special sergeant with the Special Forces of the Colorado National Guard. I read your article on Operation Vampire Killer 2000. Being sworn to defend the Constitution, not unlawful leaders, I want to provide my services if they are required. Is there any local organizations in Denver that I can participate in? Wonderful letters, wonderful. Here's one with the California Highway Patrol. 20 years plus this gentleman's been on there. He says, "I was given a copy of Operation Vampire Killer 2000 to read by my neighbor who knows I'm a peace officer in California." He says, "As you know, an offer to subscribe to your newsletter appears," and he orders the newsletter. But here's the important part of his letter. He says, "Officer McLamb, many years ago in a land far away, I fought an unpopular war. I was good at my trade. I used a 1903 A4 Springfield. If you heard the shot, I wasn't shooting at you. When I returned to the world, I vowed I would never fight in a political war again. Only when they were coming up my street would I take appropriate action." And he ends by saying, "Well, they're here." Praise the Lord. Wow. Wonderful. I'll tell you, this is exciting, folks, because if the enforcers will not enforce tyranny, who's going to do it? Isn't that exciting? Here's another letter. This, for those of you that think you can't do anything, we're all sitting and many times we think, well, I'm just one little guy. What can I do? I'm one little gal. You know, I got a house full of kids. What can I do? Somebody answered that for you with this letter. August last year, somebody got up in the heat of the night in Las Vegas, Nevada, snuck across the street, laid an Operation Vampire Killer on the porch of a police officer there in Las Vegas, and then snuck back over and went to bed. Now this officer gets up in the morning, as we tend to do, gets his uniform on, steps out the door, slips on it, and slams himself down on the ground. Now he's not a Christian officer, I understand, and he said a few nice words, picked up this damnable publication, Operation Vampire Killer, what is this? And he takes it to briefing with him. And he's sitting in the back of the briefing reading quotes from it to his fellow officers. Well, 10 of the officers ordered the Vampire Killer 2000, and George Williams, Officer George Williams, ordered a vampire killer and sent me a letter saying he's a Christian police officer, and he, Officer McLamb, is a part of an organization in Nevada called the Peace Officers for Christ. And he says, would you come to Las Vegas and meet with us this month? Is our annual meeting. We have over 400 to 500 officers that are going to come and explain what's going on in the world. And I said, oh, Lord, thank you, Lord, thank you. I said, George, I will be there. And I called him on the phone, and I told him, I'll be there. Matter of fact, I got a surprise for you. So what did I do? I knew that 400 or 500 police officers in one area at one time, you'd have probably a third of them either past military like me or presently in the National Guard or the reserves. And so who'd I call? I called Colonel Bo Greitz. And I said, Bo, we got a job to do. I said, we got to go to Las Vegas. Now, he's right in Sandy Valley, not far from there. And I said, we've got 400 or 500 police officers that are ready to be told about what's happening in their nation. I said, will you come and split 3 hours with me? You take an hour and a half, I'll take an hour and a half, and we will tell them what's happening in our nation. He says, amen, brother, we'll go. So we went. Now, 3 hours later, every police officer in that thing had an Operation Vampire Killer 2000. They were on their feet applauding, so excited about knowing what was going on in America, and that we told them they could play a vital role at stopping what was happening in the nation. And they left there and started handing out these newsletters all throughout, and vampire killers all throughout Nevada. And Officer George Williams has just been thrilled to death because Nevada has changed so drastically that now all the police officers know about who the enemy of the nation is, know how they're being used in a phony drug war, risking their lives when our government is the major importer of drugs in the nation. They know all of this now, and things are changing rapidly. These things need to change in Michigan too, just like that, and they can. Let me tell you how they can change, drastically change. Listen to this, and I'll tell you what, you're in for it now. Listen to this. If this doesn't thrill the cockles of your heart, you're dead, I'll tell you. Listen to this. Officer George Williams writes me, he says, a sheriff in Montana has put the BATF on notice to stay out of his county regarding the Brady bill. The sheriff said, okay, the sheriff said he is not running background checks on people he has known all of his life. He said he and his deputies would arrest any federal agent in his county trying to enforce the Brady bill. It gets better, folks. It gets better. Praise the Lord. Things are moving, and it's your fault. I mean, this is your report card. This is your report card, not mine. It's yours. Listen to this. George goes on to say, 3 weeks ago, one of our oldest officers, now this can happen in Michigan, because of our meetings and our material going into Nevada. Listen to this. 3 weeks ago, one of our oldest officers got into a screaming argument with some BATF agents who wanted to enter a home without a warrant to search for guns. The officer would not let them enter until they got a warrant. It got so bad that I was sent there as a backup to the officer. I called for the watch commander, and the commander ordered us to arrest the agents for burglary if they entered the house. It gets better. Listen to this. He says, the watch commander told us to draw our guns if necessary. The agents left in disgust. Oh, boy. I'll tell you now, I'm sure that these agents are, and I know some of these guys, they are misled, mistrained, misguided, just like Officer McLamb was years back. And this doesn't mean that they're not able to be re-educated. They are. They're just misled right now. They're good officers, most of them. Now, of course, we got our rascals that should have never been a cop and probably ought to be in prison, some of these guys. Like Lon Horuchi as one. But here's the last one I'm going to read from your report card. Now, this one we published in the latest Aid and Abet Police newsletter. And you need a copy of this. This is the Aid and Abet Police newsletter with the little cartoon on the front. I don't think some of you can see it here, but Theresa will show you where it's at out there. And it says on the front, find another line of work. But you got to get this article here on, it's called Give 'em Hell Harry. Now, Harry is a lieutenant for the Cincinnati Police Department. Cincinnati. And Harry has made his decision as to who he serves, just like so many of us have. He writes a wonderful article. There's a wonderful letter here that we put in the newsletter. But he says this right here. He says, the time has come for us to openly discuss something that up to this time we have mainly whispered about. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to threaten the government. He goes on, Lieutenant Harry Thomas goes on to say, I believe that we are dangerously close to the day when we will have to use the Second Amendment in exactly the manner in which our forefathers anticipated. I sincerely hope and pray that a political solution to this problem is still possible. But if that solution cannot be found, I have this to say to the megalomaniacs in Washington, D.C. Pass your gun laws. I will not beg the government for a license to continue to be a handgun owner. I will not submit to being fingerprinted or interrogated like a criminal for claiming my birthright as a free American. I will not register a single gun that I own. I will not surrender a single gun that I own. And I have this to say to you, Butch Reno. If you send your jack-booted, baby-burning bushwhackers to confiscate my guns, pack them a lunch. It'll be a damn long day. The Branch Davidians, he says, was amateurs. I'm a professional. He goes on to quote Patrick Henry to close this, and I think we'll do it. Many of you know it, but we need to close his statement with what he closed with. And he said, is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Hallelujah. Before I end, I want to tell you about how police officers really feel about you owning weapons, because you're being lied to about that. You are hearing from select groups by the national media of organizations like the International Police Chiefs Association, which, if you think about it, you would be correct in assuming that if it's an International Police Chiefs Association, the majority of the members are Marxists and socialists, which they are indeed, because it's an International Police Chiefs Association. And these are the ones that are quoted, but you're being lied to, because I have here the facts and figures of how police officers really feel about your right to keep and bear arms. Citizen to be able, number one, to defend their person and property, and number two, to defend this nation from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. 86%. I'm going to end with this statement here. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. I'm going to end with this statement, and I've just been handed a note that we're going to have some questions and answers. That's good. There's no 85-year-old men sitting back there. By the way, when I just thought of something that I have to tell you. And I'm not going to assume what this means, but I'm just going to tell you. A year later, after I had awakened to what this wonderful gentleman in the last years of his life, I believe, 85, 90 years of age, shared with me, had the nerve to embarrass me to tears up in front of a group of people. I wanted to go back to him a year later and thank him for what he had done. I went back to the head of that organization, that retirement organization. I know the lady very well. And I said, Millie, do you remember when I was out there a year ago? And she says, yes. She says, I felt very bad. She says, we felt bad for you because this man had, embarrassed you in front of us, and we could tell you were embarrassed. I said, Millie, that's fine. I said, he did me a wonderful service. I said, I just want to find him and thank him for what he did. Millie said to me, she says, that night after everybody left, the board got together and we asked who knew that man, and they said none of us knew him, and they've never seen him since. When she told me that, I got the chills all over my body. But anyway, we never know who's going to be touching us next, do we? With information or something like that. Okay, well, this is what I'm going to end with. And this is just to you police officers in the audience. It's vital you listen to me now. It's very vital, because the greatest Americans this country has grown and raised up at this time. God put every one of us here for a reason at this particular time in America. We all have a job to do. And the saddest thing I see, and you police officers listen, and you soldiers listen right now, is that the three most important, dedicated, loving, patriotic groups in this nation may very well be fighting each other very soon if we don't stop it. And that's our men and women in uniform, our patriotic police officers in uniform that love this nation just like the soldiers do, more than you can believe, so much so that they would lose their life for this nation. And the patriotic Americans may very well be brought together in conflict if we're not successful at what we do in meetings like this here tonight and what we do when we leave these meetings. And let me end with this for you police officers. Now, bring this to your heart and listen carefully. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, many of us know this gentleman. He spent decades in a communist prison camp. And he wrote a great book. And in that book, he put down, when he was asked by somebody, Alexander, at what point should one resist communism? And he said, how we burned in the prison camps, later thinking, what would things have been like if every Soviet police operative, when he went out at night to make an arrest, had been uncertain if he would return alive? Or if during periods of mass arrest, people had not simply sat there in their lairs, their apartments, paling with terror at every bang of the downstairs door and at every step on the staircase, but had understood that they had nothing to lose and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall an ambush of half a dozen people with axes, pokers, hammers, or whatever else was at hand. The police would very quickly have suffered a shortage of officers, and notwithstanding all of Stalin's thirst, the cursed communist